On today's show, I am joined by Will Rucker to talk about three of the more intriguing players in the trade-up range for the Hawks. It's Khaman Maluach, Derik Queen, Kon Knueppel, and it's coming to you right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1980 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And I want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make it your first listen each and every day. Go Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Be sure to tell your friends about the podcast as well. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, if you're a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. I'll be joined in a moment by Will Rucker, a first-time guest of this podcast, talking about the NBA draft through a very specific lens. I've been asked a lot already. I'm sure I will be even more in the coming weeks about the Hawks and trading up. If you missed it, I did a show on Tuesday evening that was kind of mailbag-driven, and I ended that podcast talking about some trade-up thoughts of my own. But I said on that show, I talked to Will about this kind of range, and on this particular edition of the podcast, we dive into three players that are in the Hawks trade-up range theoretically. Two of them are big men, Maryland's Derik Queen and Duke's Khaman Maluach. And then we'll end the show today with Duke's Kon Knueppel, the first perimeter player that we'll talk about. Later on this week, if all goes according to plan, I'll be talking about more of these guys. That includes Trey Johnson, Ace Bailey, BJ Edgecombe, and Kasper Jakachonis. But today, again, Derik Queen, Khaman Maluach, and, of course, Kon Knueppel. We'll get into more of what's going on elsewhere with the Hawks, if there's any news later on in the week. But in the meantime, today's show, me, Will Rucker, talking about three guys who are very intriguing trade topics for the Hawks in this draft. And here we go with myself and Will. I'm joined now by a first-time guest of this podcast. Will Rucker, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. I said this a little before I brought you in, but I've really been enjoying all of your write-ups, and most of it has been Sixers-centric that I've been reading, but also it's the same general, I would say, area of this class that Hawks fans are interested in. I'm doing this a little bit earlier than I might because I have said, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, I'm actually going to ask you that in a second, like I'm not the biggest proponent of trading up in this draft. I'm where the Hawks are. But it's a very popular idea. I'm sure you won't be surprised. The Hawks have 2 first-round picks, and immediately everybody's like, what can we trade the first-round picks to go get? That's just a very natural fan thing to do. But before I ask about some players, how do you kind of look at this class, like tiering it up? I know you've been covering that range, kind of below the Flag Harper tier. But how do you kind of see the lottery breaking down in your mind?
I think that my board breaks off quite a bit from consensus compared to what more mainstream looks like. But I think that Ace Bailey, BJ Edgecombe will be gone in the first 5 picks. I think that shortly after that, you'll see Trey Johnson, Knueppel, Maluach, Queen in some order after that. But I personally prefer Maluach, Queen, and Knueppel over some of those other guys.
It's actually interesting because, there's this debate and you don't need to wade into it unless you want to at Hawks and on Hawks land because Onyeka Okongwu is not 7 feet tall. That's my kind of joking framing of why that comes up. But there's a whole segment of fans that just don't think that he could be the full-time center, mostly because of size. And a lot of people want the Hawks to draft a center and trade up for a center. And you mentioned Maluach. He's a popular target for the Hawks. Queen, a little bit differently. Like I like Queen a lot too, but obviously not the 7 foot, traditional center that some might be. I guess let's just start there. How do you compare those two guys? I'm going to ask you about both of them, but Maluach versus Queen, like how do you come, they're about as different as you could possibly be while playing almost the same position in some respects.
Yeah, for sure. Extremely different prospects. Queen to me is, I think they both have extremely high upside, but I think Queen, his upside is a little higher due to his capabilities on the ball and with the ball. As a playmaker at 6'10", there's not a lot of guys that are that size, that are that fluid, that have that type of playmaking and passing ability, that can grab and go in transition and find shooters and stuff. And I think that, and I've touched on this in one of my pieces I did on Queen recently, I think that his passing is much better than the raw numbers would indicate. If you go back, even watch his film at Montverde, and even before that, he's always been a really advanced passer, left-handed skip passes, right-handed skip passes, passing out of the post, passing off drives, stuff like that. And then we've seen other guys that we could consider maybe a little more undersized centers, like Alperen Sengun, for example, have success kind of in that mold. Queen's monster as a driver, his finishing numbers and his touch around the basket, footwork. He's got a ton of moves in his arsenal. I'm super high on him. Obviously, the shot is the number one concern when it comes to him. He only hit, I think, 7 of 35 from 3 on the season, but he did hit 5 of those in the last 4 games. He went 5 for 11 in their last 4 games of the season, so maybe a little optimism there. Also was not good at pull-up twos or anything like that, so definitely the biggest area of concern as far as his offensive game goes. Defensively, definitely probably where most people have their concerns with him. Being an undersized center, not having great length either for a guy that's 6'10", only about a 7-foot wingspan. And I do think he moves his feet better on the perimeter than he gets credit for. I think that there's times where throughout his tape and throughout the season, you can see he moves his feet really well on some guards on some switches. Against some wings and fours he's got switched on to, been able to stymie them and force tough shots. Obviously, there's been times where guys have beat him off the dribble, quicker guys and stuff like that, but I think that that's definitely an underrated area of his game defensively. He actually has good hands, and he has good timing as a shot blocker too. But again, with the limited size, there are times where bigger guys will get into his body. He won't be able to anchor down as well, and they'll be able to score over top of him and stuff like that. But I think overall, I think the offensive ceiling when it comes to Queen is sky high. I'm super big believer in his upside as a guy that could be a hub offensively, a guy that you could run your offense through. And I think he's got all-star upside if he really hits on all those areas. I mean, even without the shooting, if he's able to up his playmaking volume at the next level, like I believe he's able to do, and continue to be that kind of efficient driver, scorer, and things like that, I think that he has upside as an all-star, even with that stuff, aside from the shooting. But if he starts to shoot, then it's a whole new ball game. He becomes even more of a dynamic offensive player. And defensively, I think I've kind of went back and forth on how I think he'll start, whether it be at a center or power forward, right out the gate. I think if he's at the 4 next to a guy that can protect the rim and stretch the floor a little bit, and kind of a more versatile big, I think that's the perfect scenario for him early on. I think later on he might be able to transition more to being the traditional 5 on defense, given how his development goes there. But super high on him. As for Maluach, like we said, completely different kind of player. Absolute monster play finisher, 99th percentile across the board and everything for a college basketball player historically and throughout this season. Just great in pick and roll, great at catching lobs, very coordinated for a guy that measured 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan, just monster measurables. I know a lot of people are intrigued by the clips and stuff that come out of him shooting and stuff like that. He does have really natural touch. He's a guy that shot about 77% from the free throw line. He showed at times in international play with South Sudan that he can step out and knock down some jumpers. I'm not sure if that's going to be a thing that he does right away in the NBA as far as being a consistent part of his game immediately, but I think that definitely there's some room for some optimism there and reason for that with that stuff. But even without that, his ability as a play finisher defensively, his mobility at his size is outstanding. I'll have a piece coming out on him at the end of this week or next week that'll show some of that stuff. Just the way he can move his feet. There's a possession, I wish I can remember if they played a game at home, Duke home game, where he switched on to about 3, 4, 5 different guys and just stifled everything and ended up in a shot clock violation. And it's just like the quintessential Khaman Maluach play where guys that are that big aren't supposed to be able to move that well, aren't supposed to be that fluid. And that's why what gets everybody so excited about him. And he's a guy that just started playing basketball 4 years ago. So even shows him more to, if he's already grown this much in that amount of time, you can only imagine if he continues to grow on the same progression, that what he could be. I think he can be a defensive anchor, definitely all defensive upside with him. There are some concerns with him rebounding. I know everything the Houston game stands out a lot to everybody with 0 rebounds. But So there's a little bit of concerns there, but I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. I think that game and kind of some of the issues you have within the tournament kind of magnified it to people more than what it really is. I actually think he's pretty good on the offensive glass, especially too. Helps to have some things to iron out on the defensive glass, but I don't think it'll be an issue for a guy of his size, his IQ, his feel for the game, and things like that. I think that it'll be something that he'll figure out.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and the NBA playoffs are in full swing right now with conference finals happening as we speak, and every single night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments all in one place. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a player having a true breakout, there's never been a better time to get on the action with FanDuel Sportsbook. They make it really easy to stay in the game at FanDuel, both in before tip-off stuff and live when the game is actually going on. They have player props, performance threats, and game parlays in one place, and they have more ways than ever for you as a fan to kind of get in the action, play smart, and also win big. Especially true throughout the playoffs, of course, with so many high-level games, but it's also the case every single day of the year. They have offerings at FanDuel across the sports betting space from over-unders, point spreads, money lines, game props, futures, player props, live betting, and same-game parlays. And also, they have every sport and league you possibly think of as well. That is, of course, headlined by the NBA. We talk about all the time on this podcast. Plus, they have the NFL, MLB, they have college sports, NHL, UFC, golf, tennis, soccer, both foreign and domestic leagues. They have boxing and everything in between. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time right now to sign up with FanDuel.com. And the place to go one more time here is FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. If that first bet wins, that $5 bet wins, $200 in bonus bets coming to you at FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Yeah, I actually want to dig in to both of them a little bit more. I guess we'll start with Queen just because that's a great kind of synopsis of what he is. And I totally see the appeal. I've really liked him. I know he's not traditional center size, but he actually measured okay. I wasn't sure how he was going to measure, and he measured probably like on the higher side of what I thought, which isn't anything terribly impressive. But, he has the same standing reach as Thomas Sorber, for example, even though Sorber has much longer wingspan. Like, I think he's not this monster guy, and it's a little bit interesting with him and Okongwu potentially in Atlanta if the Hawks were to go up and get him. But the offensive package is obviously really, really appealing. You mentioned the shooting. Like, how much do you think? Obviously, it's all in an exact science, but how good can his offensive arsenal be as the potential hub creator, et cetera, if he doesn't shoot? If that makes sense. Like, Sengun's not a great shooter. That's a good example of that. Like, what does the ceiling look like on offense if he does not become a plus shooter?
I think that he can still get to that Alperen Sengun level. And a lot of people might not agree with that. I'm a big Queen believer, but just touch on again, just his ability to pass, the way he moves at that size. There's a lot. I feel like it's a big misconception that he's not athletic. Like people always say, he's not athletic, and he didn't test great at the combine. But for a guy to move the way he moves at that size with the ball in his hands, it pops more in a game than it would at a combine or doing any kind of agility testing or sprints and stuff like that. Not known as a great vertical athlete, but still had, I believe, I can't remember the exact number, but 30-something, high 30s dunks on the season. Yeah. And a lot of those were self-created dunks. So it's definitely something I think is a little above as far as his athleticism. I think that he has maybe some issues anchoring down defensively, guarding bigger guys, but on offense, on his drives, he dislodges guys with his strength and stuff like that. And his footwork and his touch around the basket, I think that it is borderline special with the stuff that he can do. The game winner against Colorado State in the tournament to put him in the Sweet 16. I mean, just awkward angle, contorts his body, kisses it off the glass. Just that's the type of stuff, the rare traits, and the rare type of shot making that you'd look at and be like, wow, this guy, if he can really hone that stuff in, that's star qualities that he has. And again, I just think the passing is outstanding. I think that it's going to pop very soon, early in his career, especially. And I think the Hawks would be a good fit for him personally. I mean, they've got guys that can shoot it on the wing, good wing defenders that will help kind of insulate some of those defensive issues that he might have early on. Okongwu there as well, if he's there next to him or backing him up or whatever. I think that would be a very good team context for him to go into and start with. The Wizards are another team I think that would be a good start with him next to Alex Sarr and things like that. But I think even without the shot, I think his combination of his feel, his IQ, his touch, his passing ability, his footwork around the basket, just his ability to put the ball in the hoop. I think he's still star upside, even if the shot doesn't come around. But like I said, if the shot starts to come around, even at a NBA average clip, it opens up a whole new ballgame with him as a driver, as a face-up guy, and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. The word athleticism or athletes always is like, people think of like twitchy guys, I think more than anything. There's much more to it than that. I agree with you on Queen. He's more of a smooth, like, obviously he doesn't look like he's a super great athlete. He's kind of a thicker guy and all that, but like he's really smooth, and the way he moves is different. Like, he's not a 7-footer, but I think he can get past that without much of a concern, particularly on offense. And his skill level certainly pops off the screen when you watch him. One more thing on Queen. The defense is obviously a question too. On offense, you mentioned that the shot's kind of the only question for the most part. Defensively, it's like, what position can he guard? Is he ever going to be able to anchor at the 5? All these like kind of hypothetical questions that may lead you to like you mentioned already. Like, how do you start him versus what he becomes in 3 years? Like, what's his going to be primary role? What do you think is a reasonable projection for Derik Queen's defense? I'll keep it broad. You can go wherever you want to go.
I think it's a reasonable expectation to think that he can be a neutral defender in the NBA. I don't think it's out of the realm possibility that he becomes even a positive defender with, like I said, the way he can move on the perimeter and things like that. If he can add more strength, and if you go back and look at him from when he was 16, 17, 18 up to now, he's made a ton of improvements on his body. And as he's talked about in some interviews and stuff, that's stuff that he's still continuing to working on and adding to that. And as the years have gone on, you've been able to tell that the athletic improvements and the strength improvements and stuff he's made over time. I think that it could get to a point where he becomes a positive defender, but I think at worst, with a guy with his IQ, his feel, he's got good hands, good timing, stuff like that. I think that he'll be a neutral defender. I think right away it could maybe be an issue depending on the team context that he goes into, like I touched on earlier. I think if he's goes to a team with a solid rim protector next to him, especially maybe more of a stretch 5, would help him insulate him and fit him on both offense and defensive end. I think that it won't be something that is a major issue. But obviously, of course, the number one concern still would be that. But I'm just somebody that's not super concerned about it. I think that he's going to figure that stuff out just like he will on offense. And I think that in the right situation with the right team, with the right opportunity to really be leaned into as that playmaking hub and stuff on offense, I think he's got the upside to be an all-star.
Yeah, I really like him too. That'll be interesting to see if the Hawks are even interested enough to try to go up and get him. I don't think he's going to be available at 13. I've seen some mocks where it gets all the way to the Hawks. I'd be surprised if that happened by the end of the process. But we're all guessing. It's still relatively early at this point. Back to Maluach. It's interesting. I felt like there's a pretty big split on him in just general. Like, there's a lot of people that are really in on him, like have him in the top 5, can kind of see it, what they want to see. And there's another contingent that's like really kind of out on him. Maybe it is, and it'd be very silly for it to be as simple as not getting a rebound in the Houston game. Like that's very overblown, I think, at this point in time. But he also wasn't like a great defensive rebounder. He was an awesome offensive rebounder at the college level, like great numbers there. But I find him to be really interesting because also, you already touched on it a little bit, but like there's this like real buzz about the shooting. And like, to me, yeah, it'd be great if he could shoot, but I don't really care. Like, I don't mean that in a negative way, but like, that's not what I'm hinging my evaluation on. The touch is decent. Free throw shooting is pretty good. All that. Like, let's say for a second he doesn't shoot threes. He might take them, but whatever. Offensively, what's he gonna be? Is he just gonna be a lob catcher, play finish? Because I mean, the numbers, like the efficiency numbers, are crazy. He shot 70+% from the field, and yeah, a lot of those were around the rim. But like he's gonna live around the rim. He's a massive human being. Like, is he gonna be a plus offensive player? Like, what's the? I'm not gonna say to give me a comp, but like, what's it look like at the NBA level if he doesn't shoot?
I think he's definitely a plus offensive player, like you said, 99 percentile and all those finishing out of pick and rolls, alley-oop, stuff like that. And I think there's a ton of value in that stuff, even if he doesn't shoot. A guy that can anchor your defense as a rim protector, be a great pick and roll defender, and then be an elite play finisher on the other end. We've seen guys go on to have all-star careers by just doing stuff like that. I also think that he is a very underrated passer. I think that there's times where he flashed stuff out of short roll or out of the post where he can make those passes to cutters or make a quick decision out of the short roll. I think that is another really intriguing part of his game, especially for a guy that just started playing, like we said, 4 years ago. Those flashes and stuff like that are intriguing. I think that his touch is good. Even on non-dunks around the basket, he's got pretty good touch. There's times where he kind of has a little baby deer where he'll get knocked off balance and stuff like that, and he'll kind of throw up an ugly one. But that's with being an 18-year-old guy that just started playing, you're going to have a little bit of that stuff. But again, 99 percentile, he's finishing those things more times than not. And I think that I think he's going to be an outstanding offensive player as well. I mean, Rudy Gobert is a comp that a lot of people give him.
Yeah,
I see a lot of that stuff, and I think Maluach has more as far as some little passing things that if that stuff progresses and pops, I think he's got a little more there than Rudy. The shot already projects better than anything that Rudy's ever done, and we've seen Rudy be an outstanding center in this league for a long time. Obviously, all those defensive player of the years and stuff like that. I think Maluach has that type of ceiling on defense where he can win multiple defensive player of the years, be all defensive team, things like that. And offensively, like we said, I think he projects pretty clean as far as the basic center things. I think he projects cleanly in that area. And I think anything added on top of that would just be icing on the cake. And his physicality with his athleticism, the way he can contort his body in the air for different lobs and catches. He's got great hands. Another trait of a lot of those other good bigs in that type of role. So I think he's a lot of people think he's a boomer bust type of guy. I really don't see that. I think I see him as a pretty safe projection to the next level. I think a lot of people are kind of I've seen him draw some comparisons to Mo Bamba. I don't really see, other than the size and the length and stuff like that, that's the only comparisons I can see there. I don't really see comparisons in their game if you really watched both those guys as prospects outside of that stuff. But
agreed.
Yeah, I think he'd be an outstanding pick. I have him top 5 on my board, so I think that he's a guy that's definitely got an all-star ceiling.
Yeah, I don't see the Mo Bamba thing either. I mean, there was that was a legendary pre-draft run by Mo Bamba and his agent, and some of the videos, and it's kind of hilarious, like the buzz he was getting and some of the stuff that he never really ever showed in an actual game that they were really playing up on the. Maybe that's kind of the equivalent of Maluach shooting, which we may never see. But I trust Maluach's baseline stuff, like as a big, much more than I did Bamba's. I was never really in on Bamba as a prospect. That worked out okay for me, but no, it's interesting because I agree with you on the feel stuff with Maluach. There's a couple of nice passing things. He also, you could, if you watch him enough, you could maybe see some of the inexperience. Like he came to the game late. You kind of see that sometimes. He's not the most confident. You mentioned that he kind of flails every once in a while, but he does move well for a guy his size, generally speaking. Even defensively, like he had good block numbers, but maybe not like crazy block numbers for someone his size at the college level. Like you kind of see what you want to see, but I do buy it. I hesitate. I almost said Gobert's name earlier. It's kind of funny that you did. I don't like comparing guys to Rudy for one reason, and I totally get why you did. It's a very logical comparison. Rudy's motor is so crazy an outlier that like I don't think anybody can get. Maybe people can do it, but like it's hard to project that because that's the one thing about Rudy that was always, even now, he could just go and go and go and go and go, and he's so fast, covers so much ground. I don't think Maluach can do that necessarily, but he does move well. So like I can see it. I think I'm probably a little bit lower than him than you are based on this conversation. But also, if you just kind of put him I don't want to put him in a box in a negative way, but if you kind of just like, all right, let's do the center stuff for us, Khaman, like protect the rim, finish on defense, finish around the rim on the other end of the floor. There's really a lot to like there, and you can't teach this out. So I'm kind of with you on the floor. I don't really see him failing. I don't know how high the upside is unless it's defensively. I'm a little bit more worried about the offense, I think, than you are, but not in a way that's like going to be awful. I just don't know if he's going to be a huge value add on offense.
Definitely fair. I mean, I can see the arguments for both sides. I obviously lean on the little higher side, but
sure,
I can see the areas for concern.
I want to go to non-centers now. And look, we could probably talk all day long on Queen and Maluach, and they're really the only trade up guys. I mean, there's guys that could be gone, and I'll preface this probably at a different time. Yeah, there's a chance that some of these other bigs could be gone, Thomas Sorber, et cetera, but they might be available for the Hawks more realistically if they stick at 13. But there's this group of perimeter players. This is not going to be in order, but you got Kon Knueppel, you got Trey Johnson, Ace Bailey, BJ Edgecombe. Those four guys, I think, are pretty safely not going to be available at 13 if the Hawks just stick at 13 unless something crazy happens. I don't think. And even like I've seen people taking Kasparis Giaconis in the top 8. So maybe he won't be there either. I want to kind of ask you about all these guys, and we don't have to go super long on any of them because especially I think VJ and Ace, the Hawks would have to go really, really far up the board from what I can tell, and that's not necessarily super likely. I've read some of your stuff about all of these guys, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody that I'll let you share. But do you have a favorite of this group as far as like maybe even if you want to include Harper? I actually don't know how you think about Harper off the top of your head because I think he's like a consensus number 2. But if you don't feel that way too, feel free to add that in.
Yeah, Harper's my consensus number 2 too.
Me too.
I put out a piece on him a couple weeks ago. I think he's going to be phenomenal, and I think he's a no-brainer for the Spurs. So there was a time when the picks came out, I was hoping maybe the Spurs would maybe fall in love with Ace, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Harper.
And maybe the Spurs. I think the pathway still is. It's not a Spurs podcast, but I still don't know if they're going to want to have Fox, Harper, and Castle. It's just a little bit. It's a little bit clunky. Not that you can't do that. It's just a little bit interesting to see. But I think if they draft the best player, it's Harper for sure.
Yeah, I agree. As for the rest, Kon Knueppel was my favorite one out of all those guys. I feel like I've talked about him at nauseum on Twitter. But
hey, that's good because look, I can tell you, I don't think a lot of people. I shouldn't say that. A lot of people agree with you, but a lot of people do not agree with you, which makes it interesting. Especially, I think if you go like by the end of this process, the consensus board, whichever one you want to pull in, he's not going to be 3. I don't think. So why Kon Knueppel? Sell me. I like him too, by the way.
I just think he's an excellent basketball player. I feel like sometimes we overanalyze and try to look, how high does this guy jump? How fast does he run? And that stuff matters definitely. To play in the NBA, you got to be one of the top-notch athletes or be an outlier. And I think that Kon is athletic enough. I think he's a little more athletic than he gets credit for. Not a huge vertical leaper. He only had, I think, 1 dunk on the whole season. But he's strong, got good contact balance, moves his feet really well for a guy his body type, was a good defender at the college level. Obviously, there's some questions about the translation as far as him. He had some issues with some smaller guards at times, and there's other times where he was really well on smaller guards. So defensively, I think that – and he's an excellent team defender, outstanding, always in the right spot, active hands, all that stuff. I think he'll be – I don't think he's going to be a guy that's in the NBA that gets targeted. Like a lot of people say, he's going to be targeted in the playoffs and stuff like that. I do not think he's going to be that type of guy. I think that he will hold his own on the defensive end. As for his offense, I think there is a lot more there than a lot of people give him credit for. I posted some stuff about him the other day, and all the comments were JJ Redick, Corey Kispert, even got a Jason Capono reference thrown in there. Like,
of course,
just all the like those guys
are.
He's nothing like any of those guys. It's besides the fact that he is white and he can shoot. Those are where the comparisons begin and end with a lot of those guys. I think that he has the ability to scale up or scale down. Obviously, phenomenal shooter, over 40% from 3, almost 50-40-90 splits in his 1 season at Duke. If you look at his numbers with Cooper Flag off the court, when they gave him more usage, his efficiency actually went up even higher.
Yep.
In that sample size. I just think he's a guy that, and I've been high on Kon Knueppel even before he got to Duke. I thought that he was a guy that was a lottery pick. And when some people had doubts if he would even crack the rotation at Duke and things like that, he's extremely good at playing, at getting to his spots. Has a lot of those older, like veteran, more nuanced things where he'll play off 2 feet in the lane, bump guys, draw just a little enough of space to get off a little fadeaway. Is really good at posting smaller guards. If you go back and watch the UNC games, UNC obviously had the smaller guards with Cadeau, RJ Davis, and those guys, and he just time and time again just posted them up and either scored or made the right pass out of it. He plays the game at a super fast pace. His feet don't move super fast, or he doesn't look like he's moving super fast, but the way he processes the game is elite. Probably one of the better processors of the game that I've evaluated in the last decade of doing this. I think that he processes the game at an extremely fast pace. A great lob passer, great at drawing to and makes the quick decision. Great off DHOs and things like that. I think he has a lot more upside than he gets credit for. The floor is obviously, everybody talks about he's a safe pick. I think everybody would agree with that. But I think people question the upside, and I think there's a whole lot more upside there than he gets credit for. I think that he has the ability to be a guy that you give the ball to in higher usage, and he's going to make the right play 99% of the time, playing out of ball screens, stuff like that. I think that I'm just super high on him. I think he's an all-star guy. I like him more than a lot of the other guys mentioned in that range, and I could go on and on about him for days.
No, I like him too. I'm a fan for sure. I think people should watch if they didn't already. I don't want to overweight this, but when Cooper went out in the ACC tournament and Kon was like the guy for 3 games, I think he averaged like 21, 6, and 5, was very comfortable in that role.
Yep.
You want to overweight that because, there was also times during the season, like you mentioned, where Cooper's just on the bench as regular. They're kind of having Kon be more the primary. He's not averse to that. I think there's a lot more juice than people are assuming. You referenced every comparison I've ever heard about Kon in the mainstream. It's always a white guy who could shoot. Luke Kennard's another one that's recently has been very prominent about Kon. Look, I get why, but I recommend watching him more than just the highlight stuff. Like I really like Knueppel. I mean, the athletic limitations is I think it's a real question. Like I don't think there's any way he's like a bad player, but some of the upside stuff could be limited. There is a world. Some guys, this does happen. Some guys are limited enough where some of their upside is capped by their lack of burst athletically. But he does move well. He's really strong. Like I think he's really strong if you watch him. Like guys bounce off him, he can kind of create space. But I mean, he's still measured like pretty modestly, like an 8'5" standing reach, something like that. Like he's shooting guard size, and not in a terrible way, but like you combine that with a lack of like traditional burst, and I do get it. But man, the dribble pass shoot stuff, the way he feels the game, like I really like him. I don't know if he's, this is a trade up discussion. I don't know if he's like going to be a trade up guy. The fit in Atlanta would be interesting. I don't think it's bad, just interesting. They had Dice Daniels, that definitely helps. But yeah, I mean, I don't have to sell him anymore to you. I think you're even higher on than I am, which is impressive. I'm usually the high person on Kon, but not this conversation, which I appreciate. I do want to ask you, just to be fair, how doesn't it work? Like, what's the worry if you have one? I'm sure you've dug into something that you're concerned about. What's the pathway for it not to work?
Like you said, the athleticism stuff. I believe that he meets the athletic threshold to be where it'll be fine. But there is a potential outcome where maybe that stuff doesn't. Maybe the NBA link bothers him a little more than we kind of projected to do so. Offensively, the one concern I've seen some people have is what if he isn't a great pull-up shooter, and his pull-up shooting numbers were not good at Duke, but it was super low sample size. I believe he was like 4 for 20 on pull-up threes and 3 for 21 on pull-up twos, or vice versa, something like that. Super low sample size. And if you go back and watch his stuff from when he was playing with Phenom United and stuff like that in AAU, it was a lot better. He was shooting a lot of pull-up stuff. He actually led the EYBL in scoring, which I've touched on that before. Like, you're not leading the EYBL in scoring unless you have a lot to your game. A spot-up shooter is not going to lead the EYBL in scoring. But, I think that if the pull-up shooting stuff actually becomes a real issue, if some of those 2-foot finishes and stuff like that don't translate as well as we might want to due to the lack of length and explosiveness, and the efficiency goes down there, I think that there is an outcome where he is just maybe that safe floor guy where he's going to be knocked down off catch and shoot, going to be a great secondary playmaker and stuff like that. I think that that's a potential outcome, but I think that outcome is obviously based off how I've been talking about in the last 10 minutes. I think that outcome is a lot less likely than the other outcomes when it comes to him.
Yeah. No, I'm on your side, and I also think I think you mentioned it briefly, but like the way he operates ball screens, like he's not a standstill shooter, like a specialist guy. I think he gets framed that way. You've covered that at nauseam. But I've been impressed when he's been able to operate in ball screens, like just kind of the way he navigates, there's some real craft there. Like he's not uncomfortable at all with that. Obviously he's also a great spot shooter, and that's worth noting. Like if all else fails, he can be a spot shooter. Like he's going to be really good at that if he needs to be, but it's just interesting to me.
Yeah. I think his passes, there's so many times, and I've seen some different people that have, I've obviously watched a lot of the stuff myself, and I've seen some different people, Ben Pfeiffer, a great follow on Twitter, another guy, like his stuff a lot. He charted a bunch of he's doing like a big passing metric thing, and Kon rates out highly in that, and that the tape shows that too. It's the passes are always on target, on time. He doesn't miss a beat. There's little wasted movement, little wasted motion. Him and Maluach developed a great chemistry in some of that ball screen stuff that they did. And it helps that Maluach has great hands. Khan's a great passer. It's what made him the best team in college basketball this year, regardless if they didn't win the title, of course. But I think he's a phenomenal player. I think he's going to be able to scale up. I think he's going to be able to scale down. I think whatever you ask, if you can put him more responsibility on him, less responsibility on him, I think he's going to thrive and maximize whatever role you put him in.
All right, that will do it for today's episode of the podcast. Later on this week, as a reminder, I'll be back with Will. At least that's the plan, to talk about a couple more guys in the trade-up range for the Hawks. But in the meantime, please subscribe to this show anywhere you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow Will's work as well, and we'll see everybody next time.